Okay. There's going to be some similarities with my first talk, but the point is pretty different. And that's to talk about our culture here and how we're going to support athletes to be champions and what we have to change. The point, this is the similar part, is to look at what the best in the world do, but particularly about those attitudes and behaviors and training environments and what we have to change in order to produce those same kind of performances. So I've put this picture, so we have in the background the big fish in the small fishbowl. Big fish in the small pond, if you know this expression. I'm sure you do. There has to be some similarity in Italian. Or the small fish in the big pond, and that's the world, isn't it? And obviously we want to become the big fish in the big pond, the big players in the world. But right now, I think many of our athletes have the attitude where they're quite happy to be the big fish in the small pond, as an example of the attitude that we're talking about. So we have to look outside. We have to look outside of what we know. And that's hard. It's really hard to do because we know what we know, our experiences. But in order to get better, we have to do something that we've never done before. And I think that's the biggest message in my learning over the last year, not quite a year, since January, that I've been here, is we have to change. We have to do something we've never done before. And that's hard for kind of the ego of everyone, including everyone in this room, of like recognizing that we have to change to be better. And it's the same mentality that we take as coaches with athletes. We have to change this, we have to change training, so we have to change our environment and our culture. So that's what I want to talk about today, for this part. So I said this before at the finish of the first talk, but there is no reason, there are no excuses, there's no reason why Italian athletes cannot be world and Olympic champions. We've got to believe it. But the history of sport, the support available, the opportunities that our athletes have from youth to senior, we have no excuses, but we have to change. We cannot stay the same. If we stay the same, we will get the same performances, which we have some good performances, but we're not living up to our potential. And so we've got to believe we're capable of more. This is going to be about what we have to change. Culture is kind of I don't know, the word doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to everybody, but for me it's who we are, our identity, and how we see, how we do things, who we are and how we do things. And it's reflected in what we reward, what we support, and what we want to stop. So it's really reflected in behavior. Culture, meaning values, honesty, loyalty, integrity, doesn't mean so much unless we connect it to behavior. And I'm going to go through a lot of these different behaviors today and what we can change specifically. Now to say, talk, as I said this morning, talk is cheap. Talk is easy. What are we going to do? How are we going to be different? What actions can we take? That's what we need to get towards. Here's some parts of what high-performance culture is, what world-class culture is. The concept of continuous improvement. Kind of know as coaches, we always want to be improving, but we need that attitude. But personal responsibility for the athletes, but also our responsibility as coaches and sport leaders. An external focus, because when we're talking about high performance, we're talking about a reference to the world standard. I think that's really important. That we are action-oriented, meaning that what we need to do is take actions. We cannot stay the same. We cannot wait for something to happen. We have to take action. Working together, we talk about training environments, different coaches here, that's part of that, teamwork. And finally, bringing energy to our work. Those are principles of high-performance culture. And I put this slide because if we don't change our culture, our behaviors, it really doesn't matter what our strategy is because nothing is going to change. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, or in the Pac-Man reference, really, culture crushes strategy. I mean, we can come up with, and you know, fancy training plans, etc., or from the federation level, different kinds of programs, but if we don't change our fundamental behaviors, we're not really going to change our performance to our potential. This is the slogan of a company, but Accenture, but culture delivers performance. Performance comes from our culture. So if we want to perform, we have to change our behaviors. All right, this change and adapt. This is the theme of this talk. High performance, and in fact, coaches are agents of change. The whole thing that we do, our job as coaches, is to take athletes from A to B to change their performance. And when we recognize that, it creates an action orientation. We have to do something. We have to make an intervention. And in the global context, this is a good principle, the third point, if we stay the same, we're really going backwards because everyone in the world is trying to get better every day. If we stay in the same place, the rest of the world moves on and we stay here. So it really puts an urgency to the need to change. And in fact, the best athletes and coaches behave like this. You cannot be complacent. Right? We have to think, how do we get better? We won a race today, great. What about tomorrow? What are we going to do tomorrow? How do we get better? What's the action? So we can change attitudes, expectations of ourselves, of our athletes, behaviors, processes, focus, all things that we can change, but action. What is world class? I think it's one of these words or phrases which maybe means things, different things to different people. But I want to make sure that when we mean world class, we're not talking about participation with the world. We're talking about being competitive with the very best in the world. That's what world class means to me, and that's what we need to aspire to. And somebody made a comment today, maybe it was at breakfast, I don't remember now, but that our athletes tend to shoot for the lowest standard that we set. That's why we have to set high standards. So if the standard is top 8, then they tend to come 8th. So we have to set high standards. And this is the reference for what we're talking about when we're talking about investment, about programs at the national level, but also the aspiration all through the levels, from youth to junior. This is what the performance path, this is where we're going. So some world-class behaviors, what do the best do? So I'm going to talk a few high-level points from this and then go into what I see. The first point, invest in themselves. I think that point that the athletes take action. They're not waiting for somebody to come to them. They flip it. They come to you or us or seek the best possible environment. Reminds me of this morning, Martin Van Riel, this Belgian fellow, won the race in Japan. In the end of 2014, I never heard of Martin before. But he contacted me, he sent me an email. Okay, come to camp. And he came to the first camp. Obviously a very talented kid, but he sought out, hey, I want to change something. And he invested in himself. When an athlete like that comes to our environment, they pay, right? We're not paying them, they pay us. And they're investing in themselves, and that mentality is really powerful. And you think of how often in our environments we want to support our athletes, and so we pay them or we support them. How often do they have to take the step forward? We'll talk about that more specifically in some other ones, but Martin took a big step forward there. As I say, I never heard of Martin before. He was 6th in the Rio Olympics, so 1.5 years later, big performance change. Not without some challenges, but that investment, that idea, I'm going to do something, I'm taking action, is really important. They actively seek out the best environments, coaches, training partners. Those are the principles that we see the top athletes behaving as. They want to be the best. They want to surround themselves with the best possible opportunities. We talked about this next point this morning, but self-managed and are highly autonomous. Most of the athletes that I deal with, they book all of their own travel. They arrange everything themselves in their career. They don't have a lot of people doing things for them. They've learned to do it themselves. And they're capable of managing themselves. They can go to races by themselves. If their coach is there, great. If not, they're going to get on with it. We want them to have that kind of attitude. And the next point, we relentless desire to improve. You have to be hungry to get better every day. It's easy to say, but what behaviors does that indicate? They hold themselves and those around them to high standards. They expect a lot from their coach, from their training partners, from their environment, from the federations, the clubs. So they expect a lot. And it makes the top athletes, in many cases, very challenging to work with. But I like that challenge. And I think that all coaches, you appreciate when an athlete, in some way, learn to, when an athlete challenges you to be better. I think it's really that kind of attitude is what we want. And we can foster that by the way we communicate with them, encouraging them to engage in what they're doing. Finally, this concept of they're comfortable being uncomfortable, because in fact that's what high performance is. It's hard to be great and it's hard to stay at that level. It's not comfortable. And I think one of the themes that I've seen this year is perhaps a misunderstanding of high performance and associated with this concept of serenity, a kind of calm. But that's not really what high performance is about. It's not being your best in a discipline. It's not an easy feeling. It's a hunger. It's a desire to be better. It's kind of, you have to keep pushing, that attitude to be better every day. And we want our athletes to be like that. That's some of the best practices. So I'm going to go through some different points. Old way are some of the things that I see and what we want, and the new way, a new culture, and a world-class behavior. So this is connected to what we just said. So right now, I've observed we have a very high level of support relative to performance. And this is a problem. It's created an imbalance of incentive. So what we want is our investment, but also yours, connected to objective performance and ways of doing things. So you get support of high level when you perform at a high level, or when you're doing the right things. Okay? Italian athletes probably don't realize, but I think it's important to say that they are the best supported athletes in the entire world. Financially, support, they have incredible levels of support relative to their performance. Most of them don't realize that, but I think it's really, and I say this because this is not helping us. It's not helping us get better, because we do too much for them. It creates a disincentive to get better. How is their life going to change if they get better? If performance doesn't really matter if nothing changes, if you perform well or not well. And that's the challenge for us. We want them to be better. We all want to be better. We want to see Italian athletes on the top of the podium. But we cannot do everything for them. We cannot over-support them, or they will not get there. And this comes from different levels, and it's all good intention. We have very high levels with the club structure, very high levels of support. The military groups, while similar to elsewhere, some of the other European countries, very high levels of support. And then historically, the federation has also provided very high levels of support. So the solution here is we have to have the right support at the right times. And there's a lot of ways as a community we can change to do that. But the important thing is we must change that. If we don't change that, we are going to struggle. That culture and strategy, that culture is just going to eat that strategy. We need to make our athletes hungry to get better, and we have to push them out in the world so that they go after it. If we continue to support them at this degree, it will not be incentivized to be better. This quote is from a study, but important point. Happy, comfortable kids who get too much support do not make great athletes. And so that's the challenge we have. How do we foster the right attitude without spoiling the athletes? Maybe not so different than thinking of I don't like the family reference too much to sport, but we know where this came from, but we can do this with our children by giving them too much, right? We have a little bit of this. We have a culture of spoiled athletes, and we have to change this. I don't know where I found this quote. In fact, I don't even know who this guy, Thomas Sowell, is. But what it says is important. People learn faster when there are consequences to their actions. Meaning, for example, if you don't perform well, you don't get the same level of support. Or vice versa, it really works better the other way. If you perform well, you get more support. But we have to change this standard. I've said to some athletes this year when talking about this, because some of them feel, hey, I get less support now than I used to. And I said, you're right. Because we've had a market correction. The stock market, it's corrected now. It's almost fully corrected, but we need there to be consequences to performances. And we know this in an economics kind of way, in a cause and effect. But it's really important principle that our athletes have been insulated from bad performance or poor performance relative to their colleagues in other parts of the world. Other parts of the world, if you don't perform, you get very little support. And in fact, relative to ours, I have athletes who have been on the podium multiple times in World Cups who's maybe get 10% of what some of our athletes get. So it's a real challenge because I understand and know the intention is good, but the effect is not what we want. So here's some specific behaviors and things that we can change that's moving on from just support. We have a lot of one-to-one athlete coaches, meaning one athlete, one coach in one place. But as I was talking this morning, and particularly my reference, athletes that train together with a coach present are going to be more successful. We want them to train together. Collectively, we're going to be better than if we are individuals. But here we're changing this, but we've had a very high degree of one-to-one. And we've got to change that. We've got to get our athletes to see that they will be better training together. We have some that I think, and this is the part where they like this, when an athlete is the center of their environment, meaning they're the best athlete in their environment. And that's really challenging because often it's not a high-quality environment. So again, how often are they challenged in that environment? Do we treat them, do we spoil them when they're in that environment? When, I think you can imagine, we've all been in that situation, I've faced it many times, where the athlete becomes more important than the group, or even the identity of the group is associated with one athlete. They become the center. And it's a very difficult environment to extract performance from. We want our athletes to be surrounded by other athletes who challenge them to be better. Peers. If we want high performance, we have to do more of this. We need to have this to happen in more places across the country. This is this connection to low-level partners or training with age groupers. At a certain point, the athletes outgrow this, and we have to move them on a little faster than we have. Many of our athletes have, perhaps culturally, but they stay close to home. Whether or not home is good for training or performance or not, whether or not it is. Maybe by chance you are born and live in a place that has a great coach, a great environment, but let's be honest, probably not. And therefore you have to move. And for many in the world, this is very common and normal. We move to wherever we need to go. When I was working and living in Canada, we lived way on the west in Victoria, far, far away. And athletes from all over the country would come to train at the National Centre with Simon Whitfield. And Canada's very, very big, so you can't come back and forth. It's a 5-hour flight, just not even to the main population centre in Toronto. But we have athletes do that. They would just move to Victoria. That's what you needed to do. Right? And we have to have that willingness. What behaviors does it take? I'm going to go where the best environment is, wherever it is. We want to foster those here inside Italy. But maybe for some it's outside. But we want to grow them here. We have a lot of, I think, part-time coaches at a high-performance level. And of course, in your coaching context, most of you are not full-time triathlon coaches. But when we come to high performance at the top level, we need coaches who are working every day, professional coaches with our athletes. So there's a continuum. You start young in the club, you have a part-time coach, you move up, you outgrow your home environment in many cases. And the better we can move our athletes along, the better they're going to be supported. And it's hard because you develop bonds with the athletes. But not all of us are going to be able to provide an environment that's going to be able to deliver world-class results. And the better we can recognize that and have the courage to move them on, preferably before you run into problems, the better we're going to be as a community. And we have a lot of this is common, but telling athletes what they want to hear. And it comes back to that supporting mindset. Too much support. We tell them what we think that they want to hear. It's comforting, but that's not where high performance comes from. We need to tell them what they need to know to get better. It's too easy just to avoid the difficult conversations about performance, because we always run into challenges. But we can't just always tell them, oh, it's okay, it'll work out. We need to take action. We need to be courageous enough to tell them what they need to hear. Okay, we've translated this one at the bottom, but a version of you become like those you surround yourself with. So if you surround yourself, if you're an athlete that aspires to go to the Olympic Games and you surround yourself with low performance mentality attitude, you are going to start to reflect that. So choose carefully. This was a study that came out recently, but it connects to what we were just saying with this over support. that positive thinking, too much positive thinking, impedes performance. And that's perhaps counterintuitive, but it relates to the environment of what world class is, that we need to take action to be better. If we're too positive about things, maybe we're not going to be motivated to take action. And this second part, this feeding the ego, that's the telling the athletes what they want to hear. It's very easy to do that. We can all fall into that. Because most of the time we're either avoiding conflict, which is not high performance, or we're feeding the ego of the athlete. And we see this, I've seen this many times in different athlete and coach relationships, where perhaps the coach wants to retain the athlete, so they feed their ego a little bit. And people like that. That's the problem with that. They like it, but they don't need that. They need to be challenged. They need to be uncomfortable. So if we have too much of that, we're going to be very far away from high performance if that's happening. Some more specific old way or the wrong path and what we want to see, world-class cultures and behaviors. So one thing I've seen a lot of, waiting for somebody to do something for you. And perhaps, particularly in the role that I have, we're used to a particular leadership style, part of the culture, the big wide culture. But high performance, as I said, with athletes, what do the best athletes do? What do the best coaches do? We are able and willing to take the first step ourselves. You're not waiting for somebody to hand you something or give you something before you take action. You can take action. You can do that today. You can leave here today and take actions that are going to make your athletes better tomorrow. Don't wait. Don't wait for us. Don't wait for your club. Don't take action yourself. Empower yourself. And that's this tell me what to do kind of mentality. Perhaps in the early sport culture, when coaches were more authoritarian than now, disciplinarians, that was more common. I think young people today, no longer respond well to that. But it's not the right strategy for performance. The solution is the athletes need to make their own plan and implement. Again, don't wait for somebody. Everyone in this room can make their own plan for their own athlete and implement it. You don't need to wait for anyone else. In fact, we want to encourage that. That's this difference between low ownership and accountability, meaning and we see this with the way that athletes talk sometimes. It's, the coach won't let me do something, or the coach made me do something. This is the wrong way to talk. We never want to hear athletes talk like that, because nobody made them do anything, first of all. They decided to participate in whatever program we're doing, and they chose to do what they're doing. So we have to change both our words and also look for their words that indicate that they own their program, they high accountability to themselves. Meaning if I make a mistake, I take accountability for myself. If an athlete makes a mistake, which they do, that they take responsibility. They don't blame, they don't point the finger, and we don't either. Take responsibility for ourselves. That's what high performance is. Because you can control yourself. If it's somebody else's fault, how did you manage that situation? As I said in the morning with training, always think my mindset, if an athlete can't do something that I think that they should do, it's my fault. I could make an action that was different next time. And I want the athletes to think like that. I don't want to tell the athletes what to do. I want them to choose the right thing. And we can change that mentality. It's very easy to make excuses and to have external people that cause problems or an external thing that happens. But of course, in high performance, no one cares what your excuses are. They just don't matter. There's no column that says This is the column for people that had some problem before the race. It doesn't exist. And in fact, the story of every athlete after every race is all the things that happened. And the ones that somebody won the race, and they have the same kind of stuff happen as the person that didn't win the race. The difference is how they dealt with it. It happens all the time. Travel gets messed up, the bike doesn't come, who knows what happens, they crash before the race, they crash in the race. The winner of conv crashed, the women crashed in the last, before transition, exited 30 seconds behind. An athlete who wasn't able to deal with that situation would not win the race, but this athlete was able to overcome that without excuses. And if she hadn't won the race, don't crash, right? Because we don't care what the reason is. It doesn't matter. The world doesn't care. So the more we get away from excuses and take accountability for ourselves, I guess the translated word that often you guys tell me is the alibis, the list of alibis after races. We have to get away from this behavior. We don't care what the alibis are. It doesn't matter. Deal with whatever happened and find a way to perform. Because then it becomes, I didn't perform because X, Y, Z. But disconnecting that every athlete's got that story. And the other part of that point is all the reasons why we can't do things. We can't change because, but we can. We can decide to change. In fact, we must decide to change. That's my challenge to you is, you're listening to the things I'm saying here, probably particularly with the clubs and the support, and we can't change that, it's the way it is. No, we can change. Everybody in this room can make a difference there. In fact, we need everyone to come with us on that journey of change. And change, as I said, is hard. It's not supposed to be easy. But we have to have reasons, solutions to the challenges we have. For sure, there are particular things about this environment that are different than other places. But what we can't do is say, but that's the way we've always done it here. That's a terrible reason to continue in that direction, to say, oh, we've always done it that way. We should find, how can we be different? How can we change? Are we ready to change? Are we ready to be different? The point of, we do a lot for our athletes, but that's not always what they need. Again, it's a real challenge. It's a never-ending struggle, this, of like, our athletes need us to do something, but we need them to learn how to do it themselves. If we do it for them, they will not learn. And the more we can embrace that concept and push them to find their own solutions, the better we're going to do as a culture, as an environment. Sometimes they're going to make mistakes and they're going to fail. Sometimes we will. That's how we learn, isn't it? The most powerful learning opportunities are failures, or where we've made mistakes. It's very easy to gloss over when things are going well. You don't pay attention to the things you need to improve as closely. But we learn from our painful experiences. So we have to let our athletes fail sometimes. We have to let them make mistakes. We want to avoid big mistakes, but unless we take that step to let them do it, let them learn, they won't develop. Because we have a lot of athletes and who have their coaches, but also a lot of family members. I've noticed that a lot. Family members traveling, and I'm talking high-level athletes, or top-level athletes, a lot of family members. I understand why. You're a parent, and a parent, young girls. You want to support your children. But we're actually impeding them from developing as professional athletes if their family entourage is always traveling with them. We have to let them go. Let them fly away. We can't continue to hold their hand right up until the pontoon. We've got to let them go, but we see it. I joke, but it's true. We have many athletes in Asia right now who have their family members with them. We don't need that. The athletes don't need it. The sooner we realize the athletes don't need it, the better. And it's expensive too, traveling all around the world, mothers, fathers. Let the athletes go on their own. They can do it. I guarantee you they can do it. Okay, we're moving along. The old way, it's not unique to here, but one that we have to escape, is this idea that being the best in your country is important. The modern, the global way is that the only thing that matters is where you stand relative to global reference. Don't care if you're the first Italian if you didn't win the race. You know what I mean? But it's very easy for us to come back to that. Who was the first Italian? And that actually being an achievement. It's only achievement if it's relative to the global standard. And it happens everywhere. It's not only us, but we have to escape this. There's nobody that Javi Gomez wants to beat more in the world than Mario Mola. Why is that? Because they're both Spanish. But we have to escape that, because when it's happening at low levels, it's the wrong mentality. And in fact, we can't get into the trap of reinforcing that you can have a low quality performance but be the best Italian, and that's an achievement. We can't reward that. It's not the point of high performance. Remember, our global reference is the only standard that we have to measure ourselves by. Previous path, this is a hard one, is that the domestic races and rankings are important. And again, relative to top level, different environment completely. And the more we can move away from that for our top athletes, I'm not talking youth, junior development. Of course, they need races to participate in, to have fun, to grow as athletes. But we have to move away from this being the primary goal of many of our environments. It's holding us back from if we connect to the morning, it's holding us back from the kind of work we need to do to be great internationally, because they're racing too often at races that do not matter. Opportunity cost. You cannot do everything. You cannot be everywhere. Domestic triathlon is very, very different than ITU triathlon. We know that, but it's easy to fall into the trap of using small races as references to the global standard. Now, for many of you, your athletes' goals are moving through the domestic system. We need a strong domestic system of races. But at the very top level, once our athletes become international athletes, that's what that means. They compete primarily internationally. Javi Gomez, Alistair Brownlee, Mario Mola, Richard Murray, they do not race very often at home, almost never. And it's just a reality of our sport. Opportunity cost. We cannot be everywhere and do everything. And the more we support that, if we want to see Italian athletes on the top of the podium, we have to support them to be in the right places, doing the right things, or we're working against ourselves. We have a very well-developed domestic calendar from what I can see. We have a lot of races. It's fantastic. I've been to many of them in the last month. But they're not appropriate for development for all of our athletes all the time. But many of our athletes who are in a critical period of their development are stuck racing these races, partly because of their own choices, and partly because we enable that as a community. We've placed an incentive there that we choose to place, and we can also choose not to place it. And the last part is sometimes the minimum standard, again referenced this morning, minimum standard sometimes becomes the goal. What is the minimum standard to get some sort of funding, to move up somewhere? It's not the right attitude that we want. That's not world class. It's not, what's the lowest bar that we can strive over? We have to believe and strive towards world class. So not minimum. And this is one of the last ones of these. Old way or the wrong way is low commitment. I want to live at home, I want to have a balanced life, I want to be surrounded by my friends, I want people that know me. It's easy. That's not the characteristics of high performance. We need total commitment to achieving every athlete's potential. Coming back to where do they choose to go? Who do they choose to surround themselves with? Who is their coach? Who are their training partners? High commitment. Comfort zone. We talk a lot about this, and then it means different things to different people, but it's very connected to the first point. Some of the first conversations I had about this environment before I started was the comment that our athletes are too comfortable. They live a nice life. They're in the comfort zone. Again, connecting, that's not where high performance comes from. We have to change that if we want to be better. And we can. High performance is hard. It's not comfortable. Our athletes should not be living in serenity if they're trying to be the best in the world. I think the balanced life is a myth. If you want to be great at something, you don't live a balanced life. You're obsessed with achieving a particular outcome. And there's great joy and satisfaction from that journey. And we know, and I can say, having achieved some big success, that it really is that process that you get joy from. Because the satisfaction of the outcome is never what you think. It's very short-lived. You could win the Olympic gold medal, and the next day you're already thinking about what you're going to do next. You're not thinking, oh, I'm the greatest, and that, there's no pot of gold. We need to be having the attitude to work hard and be better every day. Do we have that attitude? There's something that everyone can do today that can make them better. Good step is being here and investing in yourself. That's a step. What about tomorrow? What can we do tomorrow? What can you do tomorrow to be better? We have a lot of athletes and coaches that have kind of mythology or superstition around the way they do things. Limiting beliefs, like I can't do this. I can't travel overseas. I can't race in hot conditions. I can't race in cold conditions. I can't race in hilly courses. I can't race in flat courses. You name it. Mythologies that are not based on reality. We can change those things. We need a mindset that is not fixed. Particularly with most of our athletes, they're not well developed enough to have those kind of opinions. They're limiting beliefs. We need evidence decisions, but based on action relative to our standards. So we can change these things. That fixed mindset versus adaptive mindset. Okay. The coaching process for you guys, but also this reflects what I think and how I have always worked, or how I learned to work, is choose people with the right attitude. We want to develop them and give them honest and direct feedback. I think that's the part that's missing when we feed the ego, or when we tell them what they want to hear but not what they need to hear, is that honest, direct feedback, because that process is also hard. It's not comfortable, but we need to do it if we want to get better. And this last point and the next slide, there's a message I can give to every coach, is respect yourself and your work. Do not lower your standards to retain or keep an athlete that does not respect you and your work as a coach. I'm sure everyone that's coaching actively has been there before, where you compromised yourself in order to keep an athlete happy. But again, we're only hurting them and ourselves, most importantly. We have to be willing to have standards. For example, if the athlete refuses to follow the program design you set out, well, you can't work with them, and you have to be willing to say no. If we compromise in this way, and I see this across the community with many of our high-performance athletes, we have gone half in. It's always half solutions. But we don't want to push them too hard, so we just compromise a little bit. And inevitably, these athletes don't improve. We're not helping them. We need to give them a good push sometimes, or if they really do not respect you and your work as a coach, then stop the relationship. The only advice I can say is do it cleanly, don't make a mess of it, but just respectfully say, look, we can't work together. Every time that I've not done that, I've regretted it big time later. And it can be very attractive. Imagine I've been in some situations with some very high-profile athletes. If you don't, and the temptation is to let them get away with bad behavior because they're good athletes. Every single time, it's been a big mistake. We have to respect ourselves as coaches. And about our programs individually, if we do our job developing athletes, new athletes will come to you. This is how it works, the best way. Athletes will come to you if you do good work. If we buy athletes or don't value ourselves, we'll attract mercenaries. And it's a very different kind of relationship. And it's not a relationship that's good for us as coaches. And we see this in a way when coaches don't value themselves. They say, come work with me. Maybe you don't pay anything, or maybe our club will pay you to come to us. We're on the wrong foot from the first step because the athlete is not investing in themselves. We have to value them. Your value is not zero, right? But many of us, we place that value on ourselves. Hey, come to me, I'll work for free. No, don't work for free. That becomes your value, but more importantly, it affects the relationship you have with the athletes. They won't value you if you do not value yourself. And where it breaks down, we all know where it breaks down. As soon as there's a conflict, you can't build a program if the athletes don't value the work you do as a coach. When I'm speaking with an athlete, now I don't take new athletes really anymore, but when I'm speaking with an athlete, if they mention the price, if they try to price shop with me, immediate red flag, no. Right? I want them to choose me without knowing what the cost really is. They know. Any athlete that talks to me knows. But if they mention price, I immediately know this is probably a red flag. This is a reason to say no. Because the reality is no coach in the world is really charging the value that you provide. You can't, it just doesn't work. Nobody is. No matter how much you charge. Charge €1,000 a month, you're giving them a lot of value, especially at high level. So it's a warning sign for building programs. I've had some discussions about this very recently about coaches who've struggled to maintain a squad or a group and the disconnection between the athlete's relationship with them and in many cases with the club. Who is the owner of that relationship? And it should be with the coach. And I said to Francesco before, I've been fired from a few jobs. I was fired from Victoria National Training Center in Canada, and I moved across town to set up a program. Most of my athletes moved with me. That's the kind of relationship we want. Now, 2 years later, we were the new national program. But that connection is what you want with your athletes, right? It's not a mercenary relationship. You're not paying them. They're valuing what you do, and you have value. No matter what your level of experience is, you have value. This is, again, kind of about coaching, but about culture, and particularly about high performance. I don't remember where I found this. I remember having a conversation with Darren Smith. Darren Smith, Australian coach, coached a lot of different athletes, including one of our own for a period. And I was having a period when I was maybe feeling sorry for myself a little bit, that it was hard. As a private coach, you're paying everything yourself, you're investing a lot of money, there's a lot of investment of yourself. And the reality with athletes is, You know, if you're waiting around to get thanked, you're probably going to wait a long time. That's just the nature of the work we do. We're giving energy. You don't always get a lot back. Some athletes, yes. A lot of, especially ironically, top-level athletes, they're not very thankful about the kind of work that we do. And that's just high performance. With age groupers, they can often be more thankful. But Darren's advice to me when I was feeling sorry for myself was, look, nobody owes you anything. It doesn't matter what you've achieved. No one cares. It only matters what you're going to do next. And I think it's good advice. And particularly when we're talking about building coaching relationships and building relationships in high performance, is if you do your job and if you're good at your job, people will come to you. Right? Talent attracts talent, or success begets success. And I think it's a really important point. Do good work, and people will come to you. This acronym, some of you know what it stands for, but basically, do your job every day. There's an extra letter in there, but you understand. But I think, again, coming back to action orientation, what can we do? Do our job as coaches. Be better every day. It's the only thing that we can do. Do your job. Just a few slides on this sort of vision and strategy stuff. My vision in a lot of different ways. What do we want to do? What's our vision? What are we trying to do here? That's two parts. I think from standing up here, it's two parts. We want to deliver world-class performance. We want our athletes to perform at a world-class level that I have referenced. Top 8 standard senior performance. That's what we want. In fact, that's why CONI, why the NOC gives us money. They invest in us, they want a return. We need to deliver that. If we don't deliver it, we'll be replaced. That's also high performance. And also inspire participation from that. There's something that happens when there's a great champion from a different country, from any country. It always inspires more people to participate, and in fact, you find new athletes come through where there are great champions. I mean, right now, despite a very modest program, Spain, the men, have an incredible amount of talent coming through. Where is that coming from? It's in big part, we should not ignore, from inspiration from the current champions that have come through. So there is a knock-on effect of success that's good for everyone, no matter where you are in the community. And I could see that, the effect of Simon Whitfield winning gold in Sydney in 2000. It inspired huge numbers of kids, people, and even just belief that say one of our own can be the best. So there's a benefit to that. And finally, the mission that underpins that is we should strive to be the best prepared team on the start line. And that can be different levels. It can be at your club level, it can be in your own region level, or it can be at the very top level. But that needs to be our aspiration. If we don't aim to be the best, you can't say, I just want to be kind of the best or sort of like the others. You have to aim to be the best if you want to be anywhere near it. So our goal, and this is the commonality between what many of you do every day and the top level nationally, is to create environments which unlock, develop, and focus. I think that word focus is very important on talent. There's nothing revolutionary there, but that's what we need to do. We need environments where our talent develops. I often say talent ID is not so hard. Talent development is hard. There's champions everywhere. We see, always we can imagine some athlete or remember some athlete who was a talent back in the day. Now they're an ex-talent. Why did I not develop? All of these things we're talking about: coaching, environment, attitude. We want our environments to be honest, direct, with direct feedback and challenging. What does a professional environment feel like? When our athletes are in our environment, do they feel like they're family members, or do they feel like they're professional people doing work? I submit often it's tempting to be like family members, but that's not what we want. We don't need to be their friends. In fact, we don't want to be their friends. And it's something I've also learned early on as we create these bonds with our athletes. It can be very strong, almost like family. And then they tell you one day, look, I'm moving to another coach. And then you maybe never speak to them again. And then you realize this is not a family relationship. You are not friends with your athletes. If you think that you are friends, you will be disappointed. And it's better that we don't set that expectation for them either. We're talking professional approach. We're not friends. We are working in a relationship. It doesn't diminish the quality of that relationship and the bond you have with them. But they will eventually leave. Every athlete will move on from you as a coach eventually, except in very rare circumstances, but you're not the exception to that. And finally, the principle that we want to invest where objective performances show us and where the right processes are happening, objective performance and evidence together. So this is a change. We need to have, there's two things that happen. We either see performance. We look on triathlon.org/results, we see it there, performance. Or we know we're going to get performance because the athlete and coach are doing the right thing. We're taking a risk there, but we know around the world we can look, this is what the best are doing. If we do that, if we believe in that, then we're likely to see performance. At least we know we're doing everything we can do. And I think the problem that we have now is we can look around the country and we can't say in enough places, we are doing everything we can do here. We cannot say that in enough places. So what does this look like? And back at this vision, professional coaches working with groups of high-level athletes surrounded by, this is all we need, basic medical support. Physiotherapy, massage, we need connection to these things. But it's athletes working in groups with coaches. Primarily the first part, coaches. When we're talking about some athletes making changes, I hear too often thinking about the environment or the place. If an athlete wants to change, and the first thing they want to know is, where do you do training camps? Big red flag, right up. This is not, if I decide, well, our next training camp is on the moon, I expect, hey, we're going to the moon now, and everyone be okay with that. If our training camps are in holiday places, we're going to get holiday athletes. So, red flag. This concept of investment. I think it's a mindset investment. Sport is like business in a way. You make investments where you're going to see a return on the investment. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is where can we make investments where we're going to see a return? What's the return we want? Better performance. This is why Connie, NOCs give us money. They want performance. We must deliver on that. Many of you in this room are directly connected to that, and we must deliver on that. It's not enough just to show up. We've got to deliver on that. And we probably haven't had the culture where there's been very much accountability for that at different levels. This we can also change by expecting more from yourselves, from ourselves. The athlete's expecting more for what they're investing in. And the changing the attitude. We must be better. So this is the principle here. We support the right athlete with the right coach in the right environment. Right? That's what we're talking about. Right coach, right athlete, right environment. That's where we can make investments. If one of these things is missing, obviously the athletes, but sometimes what we're talking about is working with the available athletes instead of the desirable athletes. So as you can see, we're not so much anymore about filling up teams. I think this is a waste of time. We want athletes to perform well enough to put on the national colors, right? So it's okay. We only need one athlete to be Olympic champion. If we only have one that's got the right attitude, the right decisions, the right mindset, we can deal with that. So we're not about just sort of making up the numbers. We can't be about that. That's how you compromise yourself. It's how we compromise ourselves. So this is what we want. Identify the right athlete, the right coach, the right environment. This is where success comes from. Now, this is kind of my personal motto, but the motto of what we're talking about here is when we surround ourselves with commitment, success is almost inevitable. You will be successful when you put yourself in the right environment. Everything moves towards that point. And commitment, it's a choice. It's not something somebody imposes on you. It's a choice. We decide to be committed to something. We decide to do the work. We decide to surround ourselves with people who have the same goal as us. I come back to this point, but leaving Rotterdam, I saw this building here over on the left by the train station. It was like a sign from the heavens. Embrace change. Love results. They're connected. Change, results. We cannot stay in the same place. And this point from Lydiard again, it's empowering to us, I think. Talented champions are not some mythology creature that we've never come across. They're everywhere. It's only about creating the right environments. I just come back to this. Italian athletes can be world and Olympic medalists. There is no reason why not, unless we refuse to change. And then we're not going to have achieving our best potential. And everyone can and must take a role in this. Again, recognizing it's hard. It takes a family reference again. It takes a village to raise a child, is the expression. Right? It's not only about the parents, it's the whole community. That's what you guys are, the community. If we have Italian Olympic champions, because many of you were involved in that process, we can't do it alone up here. There's no talent pipeline out of thin air. It's going to come from your coaching, your clubs, your events, all of those things. That's where it's going to come from. So you have to decide to do something. Take a step.